Evidence of war crimes in Mali. UN investigators accuse both the military and armed groups of violating human rights. The report recommends setting up a court for prosecutions. So, will the perpetrators finally be held accountable? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. It's been investigating rights violations in Mali for more than 2 years. Now the UN says it has evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Both security forces and armed groups have been implicated in a report. The 338-page document details atrocities allegedly committed since the 2012 armed conflict. They include murder, maiming, and sexual violence. Civilians, aid groups, and UN peacekeeping forces were targeted. Some victims were people suspected of being linked to armed groups. The investigators have handed their report to the Secretary General, and their conclusion could be used as a legal basis for prosecution. They have already recommended setting up a court. Kristen Salumi has more details from the report from the United Nations.
It contains many disturbing accounts in its 338 pages about what has happened in Mali since that insurgency was launched by the Tuaregs in 2012. It covers a lot of ground. The investigation was launched as part of a peace process in 2015, and it found a litany of war crimes and crimes against humanity by all of the main parties in this conflict. The war crimes by Malian defense and security forces include violent attacks on those who were suspected of cooperating with armed groups outside of a combat situation. And for the various armed groups, there's just a litany of crimes against humanity. It's really many disturbing details, everything from murder, maiming, rape, attacking humanitarian groups, including the United Nations there, sexual violence, rape, just a whole list of things. And one example that they give that was particularly disturbing happened in central Mali in 2017, when one armed group affiliated with the Dogon people, in retaliation for the death of one of their members, launched attacks on villages and killed a number of people, 39 people, including several children. So a lot to wade through in this report.
Let's take a closer look at the events that have unfolded in Mali over the past 8 years. Violence began spreading in 2012 when ethnic Tuareg separatists launched an armed uprising in the north. France launched a military operation in 2013. It has around 5,000 troops in the region. They back a military force from the so-called G5 Sahel countries. Security in Mali is still volatile despite the presence of thousands of UN, foreign, and French forces, and large areas remain outside government control. Interim Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane has said his government is prepared to pursue dialogue with the armed groups in the hope of peace and an end to the bloodshed. All right, let's bring in our panel. In the Malian capital, Bamako, Mohammed Salaha, journalist and publisher at lemaliMag.com, a Malian news website. Mohammed writes extensively on security and the conflict in the Sahel region. In Philadelphia, Susanna Wing, a specialist on West Africa and associate professor at Haverford College. Susanna is also author of Constructing Democracy in Africa, Mali in Transition. And in Aberdeen, Manu Lekunze, lecturer at the University of Aberdeen and author of Inherent and Contemporary Challenges to African Security. Welcome to each of you. Mohammed, let me start with you today. This report comes as there are still UN peacekeepers on the ground in Mali. First of all, how significant is the report? Secondly, from your vantage point, what happens now?
Thank you so much. So what happened now in Mali? The United Nations just came out a document accusing Malian forced armed and some armed group crime against humanity and crime of war. So Mali is already in a very fragile situation, and Malian army have become weakened by putsch and fighting against terrorism in the Sahel, in Malian Center and the northern region. So, and also we know that some organizations already have been pointing, has said that Malian forced army are accused or crime against civilian. And also we know that armed group also in a time, Malian authorities have put sanction against them, but they end those sanctions because of, in the case of the peace agreement implementation. So there are a lot of sittings that are a lot of sitting among Malian army and the group army. So the situation is very complex that we need to go deep inside and understand the configuration and say what happened and how United Nations made this report. So it's when the report came out, people really saw the importance of what United Nations has said.
Susanna, can the conclusions of this report be used as a basis for potential prosecution going forward?
Absolutely. So I think what's important here, and it's just been said, is that, you know, these crimes have been ongoing and they've already been reported. They've been reported by groups like Human Rights Watch. And the fact that the UN inquiry is now reiterating, reinforcing, and has submitted this to the Security Council gives it a whole nother level of authority and possible enforcement and holding these folks accountable for their actions. So yes, because it's an inquiry, an official inquiry from the UN that's been submitted to the Security Council, that shifts the playing field such that it can be used for prosecution.
Manu, how will the government deal with the findings of this report?
I think the government, because the government is now led by the army, it's a serious allegation to be making against the army. And if, as the previous speaker said, if this was going to go forward and perhaps move into a prosecution, names will start not just hearing about the Malian army, but we may actually hear names. And if names are being mentioned and there are people who are part of the government or at the high level of the military right now, it may indeed have serious political implications in Mali. But, you know, because it's still a report alleging particular transgressions, which we already know. We already knew about the extrajudicial killings of a variety of groups in Mali and the region. We have to wait and see what comes out if names are called and if people have to answer questions, and if these people are still involved in the army and in the government, then it would be a very serious political issue for Mali.
Susanna, I saw you nodding along to a lot of what Manu was saying there. Did you want to jump in and add to the point he was making?
Well, I think this is, you know, there's two ways this could go. One is that people who are currently involved in the government somehow have some connection to those that are named in this report. So we don't know that information yet. The other way it could go is because there has been a coup, a transition in government since the time when that this report covers, it's possible those people are actually no longer in power or affiliated, right, with the military. And so it could also be that those currently in government point and say, oh, that was them, right? We're a different crowd. We won't know until we actually know, as has been said, who's named if there are names in this report.
Mohammed, this report recommends setting up a court that specializes in prosecuting international crimes. Do you believe that that's actually going to happen? Do you think it will get to the point where there will be a court set up and we will see people prosecuted?
I want to jump on some points. You know, that's not the first time the UN Security Council report about Malian forced army. Before the coup, a report was set out, and the name were mentioned in that report, accused to make obstacle for the peace process, implementation, and we didn't see like any results. No one of people mentioned have been called to justice, haven't been given a trial. So it's not just for United Nations, the Security Council, to say some people are accused. Yeah, and also when they mention them, I think a follow-up must be done, and sanction also must be done so that people or other leaders can take this and do not make the same mistake in the coming. What I think that it's very important to follow up and to report and give feedback about what people, military, civilian, armed group are doing on the field because of the current situation. And the population, the Malian population needs to know, and they need justice. Those people accused of war crime, on crime against civilian, people want them to see them on justice.
Mohammed,
That's
let me just interrupt you and get back to one of the points you're making in a minute, because I want to ask Manu to expand on one of the points you were making. Manu, Mohammed was talking about the current situation, and I want to ask you, where do things stand right now in Mali? I mean, how much of Mali remains outside of government control?
So much of Mali remains outside of the actual Malian government control, the vast majority of it. Some of it, the French forces and a variety of G5 forces have control, and some of it is in the hands of Islamists and other groups. The actual Malian government is now quite limited in terms of the territory or the power that it covers in Mali. That doesn't mean all of it is in Islamist groups. So what is more important is that all of this are coming out of a very serious political crisis that Mali is going through, which manifests itself in both economic and security challenges. And it is the fundamental political crisis that is the issue. So you could make allegations against whoever you want to make allegations on, and we've also heard from Malians of French excesses or French forces excesses in Mali. You can make all of these allegations. You could even set up a tribunal and prosecute individuals. However, it doesn't solve the fundamental problems that Mali is going through. So I think an ICC tribunal at this time, it's good. It's going to hold a few people to account, may work, but it's really a luxury for Mali. It's not a necessity. What really Mali needs right now is for people to sit down and think carefully about the political problems that Mali has, and then try to resolve it. And later on, you could hold people accountable through other means, which could be criminal prosecutions. But at this time, I think we need to be focusing on what is more important for Mali and for Malians.
Susanna, I want to ask you to step back from this for a second and look at the role of the peacekeepers, because there are Malians who have been protesting the presence of UN peacekeepers, believing that their presence really has done more harm than good in the overall picture. With the findings of these report becoming public now, is that going to increase the level of anger from some quarters in Mali towards UN peacekeepers?
Well, I think the points that have been made are really good ones, that the people who are living through this crisis and experiencing and have experienced the violence, this is, on the one hand, is possibly a tool to hold people accountable, right? But really, they need a fundamental shift in the overall security situation. And if MINUSMA, the peacekeepers on the ground, people are calling for their removal and think that, in fact, they're causing more harm than good, I don't know. I'm not sure that connection will necessarily be made, in the sense that, first and foremost, people are looking for a greater security on the ground. The UN is a complex institution, so when you have one inquiry coming from one aspect of the UN into the Security Council, that's very far removed from the soldiers that are peacekeepers that are on the ground. So that's sort of hard to know. The other point that I'd like to say is that, most Malians are not going to be in tune with what has just happened with this UN report. In other words, it's not widely disseminated, right? It's disseminated. It's not widely shared. So although, there will be some people in Bamako who are well aware, and they may use this to sort of, they may use this in their arguments about, the UN peacekeepers. It's time for them to move on because they've done nothing about these kinds of atrocities.
Mohammed, earlier you were speaking about the security situation, so I want to ask you to follow up on that a little bit right now. How strong are armed groups in different parts of Mali right now, and are they actually strengthening their foothold?
Mali's most biggest part now is controlled by armed group. Malian government authority did not control a large part of the country. The armed group control most of. If you divide the country in three parts, the armed group control two parts. So we have armed group in the center, Chuan Mopti, and armed group in the north. So they are very, very strong. During a long time, Malian administration has left those areas, and Malian forced army are unfortunately not able to go and secure those places. So those armed groups, they were created to secure themselves, their population. And some also have been created to claim for political reason. But now most of Malian territory is occupied by armed group, and the authorities became weak. Malian administration became weak. So the forced army are obliged, Malian authorities are obliged to negotiate, to consider those armed groups before they have strength. They are the one who control the bases. They are the one who secure the population. So the population believe them, trust them, because they don't see Malian administration. They don't see Malian authorities. So the population consider them. And also some parts are secured by MINUSMA, some parts are secured or followed by Barkhane or G5 Sahel. You see, so Malian security is become something under threat beyond of securitization by armed group, by locality. So our national system security need reform, and they need to consider armed group.
Manu, could you talk to our viewers about the humanitarian toll that the conflict has taken in Mali? I'm speaking about how much of an impact civilians have had because of conflict, how dire the situation is for them.
So the humanitarian toll is massive. It's huge, if you ask me, because the fundamental problem is the Malian government is no longer capable of performing the role of a government in many parts of the country. The Malian environment or climate is changing, which is affecting people's livelihoods and the way that people have always made an income for themselves. Then you have the violence from all sorts of groups, as Mohammed was trying to explain earlier on. So many different groups that if we start naming them, it may take 2 or 3 minutes to do so. And the violence is not decreasing. Some of these Islamist groups are aware of the conventional forces like those of France, and they know how to run and hide when the French approach. And so even though you may take, the French may take a particular area for a particular period of time, it doesn't necessarily mean that the groups have been defeated. It's just the groups have pulled out and they wait for a suitable time to come out. So as Mohammed said, around 2 parts of Mali is covered by all of these groups. So the citizens or the civilians in this parts are generally a humanitarian problem, because you need to find a way to support them and they need to find a way to survive. So Mali and the Sahel region is one of the biggest humanitarian crises on earth. So that's how big the problem is, and they're suffering from quite a wide range of challenges. And we need to keep emphasizing this point of the political crisis that Mali is facing. Mali is a complex social and physical environment. Mali has a political system that was coupled together, I think, in the late 50s, and has used a variety of means to keep these disparate groups together for a very long time. And as we've seen through the coups and the botched elections, that the system is no longer working for no one, not even the Malian elite, as we saw that the Malian elite was kicked out in August this year. It doesn't work for anyone. So the fundamental issues for both the UN, France, the United States, and the powers in the world is, how can you make this system work for the different groups that are in Mali? And it's time to keep aside dogma, it's time to keep aside politics and say, look, this is a 21st century Mali that no longer works. What do we then do? And we need to think about serious reforms that will bring together different groups, whether they are Islamist, whether they are racial or ethnic.
Manu, I'm sorry to interrupt. We just have about 1.5 minutes left, so I just want to ask one final question of Susanna. Thank you for your answer there. Susanna, just how fragile is the political situation right now in Mali? I mean, since the coup, a transitional government has been tasked with organizing elections. Where do things stand?
It's extremely fragile. And as we've seen in Mali, elections, you know, they don't mean stability. So while everybody's demanding elections, and ultimately there should be elections, those who are in control right now are in control because of a coup. But if these things move too fast and you have huge swaths of the country, people who live there who are disenfranchised because of the security situation. And the other really important issue in Mali is that there's been sort of a continuation of the same group of elites time and time again, just a reshuffling of individuals. And no real opening of the political system for wide participation. And this leads to ongoing fragility. So just as what has already been said, you know, the fundamental problem in Mali is a political one. Everybody needs to come to the table somehow, right, and renegotiate what this system will look like. The problem is that the spoils are too great for each group, so nobody wants to provide the space for everybody to participate. But it's a very fragile, insecure situation currently.
All right, well, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thanks so much to all our guests, Mohammed Salaha, Susanna Wing, and Manu Lekunze. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.